Because as the sun rises over central Texas today, residents are still grieving the loss of at least 120 people across 6 counties after storms surged through the region nearly 1 week ago. A desperate search by air, water, land, and even horseback continues at this hour, as officials say more than 170 people are still missing. That number includes 5 campers and 1 counselor from the beloved Camp Mystic, where more heartbreaking stories of loss are revealed with each passing day. They include 8-year-old camper Mary Kate Jacoby. Her family says she entered the gates of heaven, adding she was tiny but mighty and full of love. Today, questions continue about whether more could have been done to warn residents ahead of those catastrophic floods. At a press conference yesterday, local officials defended their response and said those questions about how they handled it will be answered in time.
I believe those questions need to be answered to the family of the missed loved ones, to the public. We're not running. We're not going to hide from everything. That's going to be checked into at a later time. I wish I could tell you that time.
Folks, I don't know how many lives our KPD team saved in an hour in Kerrville, but I know that this tragedy, as horrific as it is, could have been so much worse.
This comes as new reporting from NBC News revealed that the former Kerr County commissioner described the county's flood warning system as antiquated all the way back in 2016, and that Kerr County officials then discussed warning systems more than 24 times since then. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson has the latest for us from the ground in Kerrville. Priscilla?
Yeah, right now the search for the missing is continuing to grow more urgent and more desperate with each passing day. We know that officials have said that they have some very heavy machinery out here as they are trying to work their way through this very large debris. You have large trees that are down. You have vehicles that were pulled in to the river, also pieces of homes, according to officials. And so they are urging the volunteers who are out here who want to help the people who are searching to continue to do so, but not in the areas where they see that heavy machinery, because they are trying to handle these areas obviously very delicately in case they're recovering remains, or perhaps there is the miracle that they will find someone still who is alive. But I will tell you, officials have said that they have not pulled anyone out alive since Friday. Meanwhile, you also have the governor overnight releasing his priorities for the special session, which is set to begin later this month. And that, of course, at the top of that list are all of these issues around flooding. That includes flood warning systems, flood emergency communication, relief funding for this hill country area and these floods, and also natural disaster preparation and recovery. And officials are continuing to be pressed about this response and whether or not they acted appropriately in the hours as these floodwaters were coming in. But officials still not answering specifically many of these questions, only saying that right now their focus remains on so many of those people who are still missing.
NBC's Priscilla Thompson, thank you for your updates. And elsewhere in the Southwest, at least 3 people have died after flash floods swept through the mountain village of Ruidoso, New Mexico. Video shows broken trees, destroyed homes, and muddy debris as rescue crews work to clean the wreckage. Officials say a 4-year-old girl, a 7-year-old boy, and a man aged 40 to 50 were the victims of yesterday's flood. 4 people in the community there remain missing. Ruidoso, though, is no stranger to natural disasters. Wildfires raged through the area last year, leaving burn scar in the hillsides and canyons that was then unable to absorb much of Tuesday's rainfall. A lot of weather happening around the country that we're tracking. White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Ken Thomas, is joining us now. And it's at the nexus of politics and those natural disasters that we should start this morning, because the president is set to go tomorrow, I believe, with the First Lady to tour that damage in Texas. What do you imagine that is going to look like? We've seen some controversial trips from him before to people who are struggling in the aftermath of natural disasters.
Yeah, I think this trip will be something that we've seen before. He will, we're expecting him to go to Texas, meet with family members, get a briefing from local officials there. I'm sure he will meet with Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Yeah. He has very good relationships with people in Texas. These are political allies of his. But I think what's different about this trip is that he has talked about phasing out FEMA and this idea that the federal government should not have a large role in handling these kinds of disasters in the future. And I think this case, and we could see in other cases in the future, is just how well can states really respond to these kinds of incidents? There's been concerns about a lack of a warning system, as this terrible storm came through. Is that something that a state can really do on its own, or is this just one of those functions that you need the federal government to provide that kind of leadership? I mean, so much of what FEMA does in the aftermath of a storm is to flood the zone with money, but also coordination. It's a huge effort, to coordinate all of these responses. It's overwhelming for governors, for local officials on the ground when these storms happen. And so, is this something really that a state can do on its own? And keep in mind, this is the start of hurricane season.
Yes.
We don't know what is ahead. Are we going to have other states, in the Southeast that may have to deal with a massive hurricane and a recovery? So I think this really just raises questions of whether we can really phase out FEMA like this administration has been talking about, or are we going to have to basically do what we've done in the past, which is maintain a federal presence?
Yeah, I think that's one of the central questions here, because you're right. Trump is going to a place where he has political allies that shouldn't really be a part of this conversation. And yet I think you're right to point it out. So the open question, as he talks about phasing out FEMA and the timing, again, so important at the start of hurricane season, all of that is really going to come into play. And it'll test whether this is an administration that can take in new information that might not jive with what it initially was trying to do policy-wise. Will they change course? I mean, we'll ultimately end up seeing. Ken, I want